Livia, hi.
Hi, Miguel.
You have firmly established yourself on the urban landscape in urban agriculture in Copenhagen. Now, we've never met, but I know all about the work that you've done. And we're going to talk about where we are right now and why we're in the middle of lots of plants. But I want you to tell me about your first project. How did you sort of launch yourself into urban agriculture in Copenhagen?
So it's 7 years ago that we started ØsterGRO. That was the first rooftop farm in Denmark, in like the outskirts of ØsterGRO, of the eastern borough in Copenhagen. And we were 3 young people. I was studying architecture at the time, but dropped out when we finally got the possibility to start on this old car auction house. So we just happened to find the perfect building. We had a dream of creating a rooftop farm in Denmark because there was no one there already, and we all got inspired from the US. And then Sophie, one of my colleagues back then, she met an architect at this city renewable office in the climate neighborhood of Copenhagen. And there was this private building owner that had just like an empty roof standing there for no use. And he had said that if anybody wanted to make a climate-friendly project as part of the municipality's visions, then he was to talk to.
Here's the real estate, yeah.
Exactly. So we were there, like 3 young people with a big dream, and then a municipality with a focus on climate and climate adaptation, and then this private building owner that were willing to give out his private property roof for the city. And then we all got linked, and we got money from the municipality because they did this climate neighborhood, and but there was no project on any roofs as part of their planning. So us coming with that dream was just perfect for the whole vision of the neighborhood. And then only like half a year after we got the deal with the owner, then ØsterGRO was there. Fully funded by the municipality, and then a national grant called the Grant for Organic Farming that also wanted to support the project because they could really see the idea and potential in like really just teaching people about organic local produce within the city.
What is the building? Like, was it? It was a garage, right?
It was
a parking garage.
Yeah, it was an old car auction house.
Okay.
So they used to have there's a huge elevator that can have a whole car into it, and there would be cars and machines on all levels back in the days.
Okay.
That was many years ago, and then it's just been standing empty.
Like the whole building's empty.
At that point, it was the storage on the levels underneath and an empty roof.
Right.
Yeah.
So what did you start growing there?
So when we got started, it was over 100 different varieties, and it still is. But the goal was to make a rooftop farm that could be self-sufficient financially, that could invite all of the citizens of Copenhagen and visitors, and produce food for local neighbors, and really get Danish people to know about the model for producing and distributing that's called CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, because we are not familiar with that at that point in Denmark. Even though small projects have been there, it was not well known. And it's just a beautiful model of bringing consumers and farmers together and really just know the origin of your food, get fresh vegetables, and support the farmer ahead of the season. So we wanted to have an association with members and produce vegetables for the members, but also have a weekly volunteer day where everybody that wants to come and participate could come. And then we ended up having a restaurant up there as well. And that became the thing that made everything possible without being dependent on grants. So
it became a business model.
It became a business model that now makes sure that we can have a beautiful, involving city, edible city landscape, where we just an elevated city landscape where we use a space that was not used before. But we are not dependent on grants in order to do so. And that was really what was our goal as well. It was to create a very community involving project, but in a way where it could run as a business.
Now, I've seen And you have as well, like projects around the world. I mean, I've seen like huge roofs outside of Montreal and the post-industrial suburbs, and it's amazing what they put up there. But it's all like selling at the local market, you know, in Montreal and whatnot. So I mean, there are some community-based projects, lots of them as well. But I mean, how important was it from the beginning to involve the local community? Was that part of your project from the beginning?
It was key from the beginning, yeah. And it was also what we thought would be the business model, would be to educate. And then it ended up being a restaurant that really got it into a sustainable like model for us to live from it and to include more people. And like now with ØsterGRO, now our restaurant up there and our community, like we just reach out to more neighborhoods with community supported agriculture, collaborating with farm outside of the city. So we're in 9 neighborhoods for members to pick up fresh produce around the city. And then our new project here, ØsterGRO, we are 45 employees. And that was, yeah, so from the beginning we thought that what was also the vision of the place to be an educational, involving place would also be what we could live from. But in the end it turned out to be a restaurant, which was also just something that is really, really well fitted to our vision. Just none of us were chefs, so it was not the first thing we thought of. But now to be working so closely related to chefs in the kitchens and actually have all the produce out there, but also be able to experiment with both like what can end up on a plate, but also what can end up in a glass of fermented things.
But was the restaurant part of it? Sorry.
So from the beginning, the restaurant was not part of it.
Okay.
So it after a couple of years, a restaurant became a part of the project.
Somebody just said, "Hey, what about a restaurant?"
Yeah. So we collaborated with a couple for 2 years that rented the greenhouse, and we built a kitchen for them. And then they moved to Sweden, and we took over the restaurant ourselves. And then it really became like what we dreamt of it to be, because it was also really important for us that the restaurant was run in a way so it was not too excluding things, like that everything really like worked together. And that's always easier if it's the same people behind, so it doesn't become like a weird isolated thing for itself in the middle of all the community-based project.
So you made it sound really easy, you know, and it sounded like it was, right? Like I was a man with a building, the city's going, yeah, we have an idea, and everything went together. But if you live in Copenhagen, which I do, you know about the recent story, I think it was like 2019 or something, where, you know, fantastic idea where everybody's on board meets boring bureaucracy. I really want to hear it from you yourself, because I know I read the story.
Yeah, it was definitely something that was almost taking the life out of the project. But for many years, so we began with like this temporary allowance for 2 years to be there on the roof. And then there was a demand for 6 parking lots. That could be a problem potentially, but it would never been a problem because there was space in the yard right underneath. So we're never really struggling in our heads with like those 6 parking lots. But then when it turned out like that we reached the point where we then had to apply for like a permanent allowance to be there, then it turned out that the department had looked into a wrong drawing when we applied the first time. So the 6 parking lots were not 6 but 24. And then so it just became a problem all of a sudden because we couldn't fit 24 parking spots in the yard. So we had to like find that around was the demand from the municipality in order for us to have a permanent allowance to be there, and that was just simply impossible. To find like a parking spot was not just one of the ones in the street. It had to be privately owned and not demanded on that building plot. Like that's impossible. And if we were ever gonna reach that point where we found one, it would have been so like costly to do that. But we never even reached the point. So it was back and forth with the administration in the municipality us talking vision, them talking rules. So that of course was not really corresponding either.
Yeah.
But it was.
I have a dream. Oh, we have a paragraph.
Exactly.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Exactly. And you could and then you would be completely wasted afterwards. Like when we came out of the municipality, we would always came in with courage,
Yeah.
came out with completed disappointment, because truth was that ØsterGRO was everything that the municipality also wanted, everything that the neighbor, the private owner was not looking into using the roof as a parking spot or a parking lot for not at all. So
he was on your side in a way, right?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And nobody was not on our side except for the rules.
Okay.
And that is just, that's where bureaucracy becomes really crazy, because nobody, no one had an interest in this. Because in the end, the owner could just, he would not have made it. It would have been so weird to use that car elevator as a thing that should bring cars in and out every morning. You're going to work.
Yeah.
3 other people are going to work, and you have to wait for each other.
And an old one too, right? Not maybe one of the new underground ones.
So everything was just crazy about this whole thing. So in the end, had we not won this battle with politicians that went into it, rules that were bended and that we got a dispensation, is that what you call it in English? Yeah, then it would have ended up that we had to take down whole ØsterGRO Rooftop Farm with all the magic of that, just to have an empty roof with parking spots lined up, but not used.
And nobody ever parking in them, yeah. But I remember...
So luckily we won that battle, but that was only because we then made it into a big media story, reached out for politicians, which was almost all politicians in the department wanted this to be changed. But especially one was really, really fighting for us. And that was finally someone to talk visions with. And then we got ourselves a good lawyer to talk rules.
I mean, you fought hard and it was draining, as you said, but I mean, reading about it and the media, I'm going, oh my, this is kind of an easy media win. Silly municipal laws, dumb paragraphs, ridiculous kind of bureaucracy against, young people with this amazing vision and something that's, is proven to work, right? I mean, I'm thinking, oh man, that's going to be a good one.
yeah, definitely. It seemed like there was even songs written already about in paradise to put up a parking lot.
Yeah.
So it was
They predicted you 30 years ago.
This history has been told before, just in other versions, So it was definitely in that way. It was of course, this is not gonna, we're never gonna accept this to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's not only us who's working here and members and volunteers, the whole society really came together and fought for ØsterGRO. And that was magical to see. So with all these hard struggles, it also comes a really, really strong support team, and of course also a lot of people all of a sudden knew about it that didn't know about it before.
Yeah.
So but I could have really asked for all these seasons without this crazy bureaucracy, because it really took a lot of energy from us that we could have used probably in so many other ways where it would have been benefiting the city much more.
Yeah. So you got this idea, but where did the idea come from? What was your inspiration to finally implement large-scale urban agriculture in Copenhagen?
For me personally, it was Brooklyn Grange in New York. That's this, I don't know if it's still the world's biggest, but it is. It's 10 times bigger than ØsterGRO. It's around 6,000 square meters, and it's on a roof on the 11th floor in Brooklyn. So, but in with Flushing Avenue in the old Navy Yard area.
Yeah.
So you have the whole river at your right there, and you're on the 11th floor, and you can see the whole Manhattan skyline. But you just have a huge field, bigger than this, that surrounds you. And so if you just look down, you're in the countryside.
Is it on a roof?
It's on a roof.
Yeah.
It's insane. So when I realized that this existed when I was there, at that point I had never really just even thought about growing food in a city, because I come also from a very environmental, like friendly, and also like really like my parents have been fighting some political battles throughout their lives. So I've also been growing up with like being a little bit skeptic to like pollution and so on. So like the whole thing about growing food in a city such as New York, especially, I was like a little bit skeptical as well. But when I found out in studies made like globally and also in Denmark that it's minimal what plants take in like comparison to what we breathe in every day when we live in a city, then I was just like, but then like there's so much potential in this. Just to see how they like brought in school children to teach them. Also had a CSA, that was where I heard about CSA in the first place. It distributed to restaurants as well. I just wanted to make it with even more focus on the community and even more focus on the teaching, and not so much like living off the production, more living off of the actual, like to rent it out and to educate people. But the inspiration came from Brooklyn Grange and also from other urban farms that Sophie and Christian, my partners, had visited and seen in the US. So like when we found each other and we found out that we shared this dream of creating a rooftop farm, then we just began to look at Google Maps, and then just a week after we met this architect, and then everything just rolled really fast. So it was a really easy, lucky story from the beginning, and it's been really, really hard for anyone actually to really like repeat that, because we were so lucky to have a building that could take the weight, so lucky to have a private owner that was just willing to give, and municipality that was also willing to support because of the vision. So it was definitely a sunshine story. And we have tried to help so many others like through with same visions of creating rooftop farms elsewhere in Copenhagen. I've tried ourselves as well. Haven't happened yet, but I know that there are some on their way finally. But it was just also lucky. Not to say that it's impossible to do it, but it's definitely also worth looking into all the new buildings that are being built, because it is definitely easier to move into a new building and make sure that everything is established for like the good conditions for a rooftop farm. But it's also, of course, super, super interesting to look into the old ones and have a context that is just there. Yeah. So there are pros and cons with all the different ones. I studied architecture for 2 years before I dropped out, and I mean, everything for me is about context and about making it something that fits the human scale and something that's a livable city. And when you create new, you have the freedom, but you're also always limited about all these things that limit you. Whereas when you have a context, it's frames that makes you more creative. So there are always pros and cons in that way. But we were really, really, really lucky. Yeah. All of a sudden we became parking spots experts. Yeah. So like looking into that was like also a whole world of like, there's so much potential in like multi-using parking spots, because if you have a ground where it's only commercial building, and if you have a ground where it's only housing, then you have empty parking spots either in the day or in the night. If it could be opened up to like where, I know it's, of course that happens, but I think our parking spot problem in Copenhagen could be fixed with the parking spots that we already have. We don't need more. No, we already have 3 for every car in Copenhagen. Like, you know, exactly. And that serves maybe people who come in from the suburbs, but like they don't pay taxes here. They don't, you know, we pay for them to drive, like basically it's subsidies, right? So yeah, we already have 3 for every car park. We have 3 spots for every car already in Copenhagen, right? So yeah, we don't need any more, my God. All right, sorry, it's not about parking. But seriously, but it is again about parking, because parking takes up a lot of the space that could be something that could improve the life in the city. And it's really an important task still. It's like just one parking spot. The city of Copenhagen, to paint a parking spot and maintain it, it costs 50,000 kroner, right? For one, just to paint it.
And if you, what do they pay? If you're a resident, you pay like 100 euros, 750 kroner. Like it's just the worst business model in the history of anything, right? Like, oh my God, sorry.
But it really is like something that just, it limits the possibility of creating green spaces both on the roofs, we know now, but in the street level very much. And that's just a question of, do we want this to be the thing that we are amongst when we're in the city?
Yeah. It's also, cars are parked 94% of their lifetime. You buy a car, it is not moving. The motor's turned off for 94%. It's just really a bizarre statistic.
I love these statistics.
Oh,
they're
I got
ridiculous.
Lots. I just pull them out of my pocket here.
No, but we done ours now to try to hide them away with the fence, with our biodiversity fence.
Yeah.
So have a lot of bushes and crawling plants is going to cover this fence.
So 2011, like the biggest cloudburst in recent history. I remember it well. My God, the whole city remembers it. We were paralyzed by it. But what role did that play in the creation of your project?
So that role, like the cloudburst, played a role in the climate neighborhood to become the climate neighborhood, because the climate neighborhood in Copenhagen was just another city developing office, and we have a few of those running for a 5-year period where you like make an office outside of the like center of the municipality and you decentralize yourself in order to be like really there, like eye to eye with the people in that area where you're developing. And this developing office started in 2011 when we had the first cloudburst, and for that reason it became the climate neighborhood.
Okay, so that was
instead of just being a normal like city developing office.
So it became the part of the perfect storm, like everything just sort of went boom, right? So it was part of it, right?
Yeah,
okay.
So, and it was just before we came into the picture, but that was the reason why you wanted to like focus on climate adaptation in that neighborhood. Also because St. Kjeld's Kvarter, which is called, it's very much concrete there, and they could already see just by like making the roads like narrower and like changing the way things were parked, and like 25% of the concrete could become greenery. So that was just one of like the goals for the neighborhood, and then to create these like green parks, green like the roundabout that's now a really beautiful, much more of a square. It's always been called a square, but it was always a roundabout before. Where the cars just went like crazy fast around because it was so wide. Yeah. So there was just a stupid like usage of space in the area. So there was a great potential. So the cloudburst played a big role for it to become like a climate adaptation developing focus.
Right.
And if it hadn't been that, we probably would never have found our way to the roof.
That's what you did. Let's talk about what you're doing, and where am I sitting right now? We're still in Copenhagen. We're not on a roof, we're on ground level, but tell me everything about this place right now.
So Øens Have, translated into exactly the garden of the island. And that has been a dream for us for many years now, to make another like vegetable field and restaurant and like involvement of citizens somewhere else in the city. And then Refshaleøens Ejendomsselskab, which owns Refshaleøen, this area in Copenhagen where they used to build huge ships. They contacted us because in the local plan there was a like vision of creating an urban farm, actually out there on the other side of this building. But then it turned out that this plot was better, and for us that was very lucky because this used to house the canteen, and it burned down in the 90s at some time, and it happens to be like one of the only non-polluted grounds in the whole area. Yeah,
because that's hard, right? And also in Copenhagen, generally polluted.
In general, but especially in Refshaleøen, because it was just this very hard industry before. So to end up at the old canteen ground where like all the workers back then used to eat at long tables at like like they were the same direction as our beds are now.
Okay, cool.
So here, like people would be eating, and
Thousands of
where
them too, right?
where the container is behind us, it would be like a long stretch kitchen where you could come up, and then there would be like 22 places to go and get your lunch served. So for us, this just meant that, okay, somebody know about us from our history of having ØsterGRO, so we are the ones that are also contacted together with ØsterGRO, that we share the grounds with when it comes to someone that wants somebody to create an urban farm. So that's already completely different from back then. We were lucky back then, of course, but to come up and have to create the idea yourself to someone like just drawing you into a local plan already.
Yeah.
It's completely different thing.
But cool.
Super cool.
Yeah, right.
And then we have a nice rental agreement for the plot. It's not a donation like it was with ØsterGRO Roof, but it's definitely a rental where it makes sense to do this, even though we can only be here for 7 years. We're gonna hopefully be here for longer, but the plan for this area is to build housing, as it is for all other neighborhoods that are untouched. So that's gonna be a struggle, for sure. And you can feel now that people are like, now 7 years, it feels like it's close now. But we're at least gonna be here for 7 years, and that's enough time for us to make a project like this and feel like it's gonna mean something still. Because now we've run ØsterGRO for 7 years. Like, did someone want us to take it down now? It would be horrible, but it was still been very much worth it. So we just now have established the biggest farm, like urban farm in Scandinavia, together with ØsterGRO. So
This is the biggest in Scandinavia?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So ØsterGRO, they produce mushrooms. They're gonna have a farm shop, and then they're gonna have a huge greenhouse with the greenhouse vegetables. And then Untitled, we are producing all like outdoor vegetables, perennial plants, both edible for us, but also very much edibles for the insects and birds. And then we have yurts, these Mongolian-inspired tents built by a company called Lyse, like bright nights. And from there we serve food, like more days a week than the majority of the days in the week. And then we're gonna have chickens and rabbits and bees. And we have a huge yurt tent as well for all kinds of events, but we're gonna have a big focus on teaching schools out here. So it's already, we opened 2 months ago, really like a living place of both people that want to join in the field, but also guests in the restaurant. People are coming for morning yoga, they're coming to see a football match, they're coming to gather and talk about important issues in the world. In the big tent as well. No, so yeah, Untitled is a dream that have really come through like in a very short time as well.
Did you, when you got the opportunity and somebody called and said, we love your work, proof of concept with ØsterGRO, you want to come out here? Like, were you guys like, should we do another one? Or were you just like, yeah, duh? I mean, how easy was it for you to make the decision?
Definitely, yes, we want to do this. Let's see if it can work financially. And like the hand on my heart, or whatever you say in English, it's not easy startup, because we come out of a year with Corona, and we have used all our savings on just getting our employees through this crisis without firing anyone. So we definitely did not have the capital that we wanted to have, and it's so much harder now to get like funding, even though you do projects that are really, really much like whatever the grants say that they want to support. So it's a complete different story in terms of like the establishment. It's not as easy with this project as it was for ØsterGRO back then. So we've had to take up a lot of more pockets from pocket savings from ourselves this time. And for that reason, it's a greater like risk, but there's no questions asking whether we should do so, because this was just an empty grass ground. And I could not live with it being so for another 7 years before they start building. And also it was very important for us to become to show how you can do this in a neighborhood that is now facing in development, becoming into like a housing area, because it's so important to get not just some trees here and there when you look into creating a new neighborhood for people to live in. It's so important to look into creating some urban nature that is community shaping as well, that like really makes spaces for people to meet and to come and like get yourself involved in what nature is all about. So of course this whole thing about talking about nature and city nature and so on, it's like, yes, it's urban nature. Before that there was a green manure, there was some diversity in that, but what we're creating now has far more diversity. We already like see how much life it has generated of insects and birds, but also the life that have increased in the ground already from when we started in April. So when we do this, it's because we want to open all our eyes to the fact that we are part of a big ecosystem and find out what our role as human beings is in that. And really just like to show that by collaborating with this huge amount of life, or like life that is amongst us, we can actually get much further. And there's no point in killing the life around us and trying to control everything with our human brains, because everything just works much more brilliantly if nature can take over a bit. So that is what really is what we want people to experience by doing these urban farms. So for us, it's not about living off the produce, it's about living off bringing people in contact with the soil. And if it's as a guest in the restaurant with high heels, or if it's with like gumboots for a rainy day, I don't care. It's just to bring in a majority of people that have either a huge interest already or has no clue about what like regenerative agriculture is, or why it's important with city nature, and like what it gives to you as on a private level, and what it gives, like what purpose it serves for a city. So everybody is welcome here, and by being in the street level, not hidden away on a roof, then it's easier to get that majority of people that is from all different backgrounds, because people just walk right through. Whereas in ØsterGRO, people have to know about that we are there in order to come. And in order to then attract a majority of different people, you just have to do a lot of different activities. Same activities we do here, but people also just come as gifts from the side because they're on their way to the street food market or whatever.
And it's not a bad location when you have the big street food also in this post-industrial area where, I think it was like 1 million people a year, roughly. So you got a lot of foot traffic going past, or bike traffic as well, right? So it's kind of a cool location as well.
Definitely.
You're not like out in the middle of nowhere if you,
No.
You've got a lot of people going by.
Yeah, and you're also very, very much in an urban atmosphere out here. But what is amazing is just that Refshaleøen is such a amazing neighborhood in terms of having so many people doing like restaurants, like alcohol, music, all these creative offices that are like housing themselves in these old buildings. And then you have all the huge festivals. You have space. So all of these things all together makes Refshaleøen such an important part of the city. And that is something that you really, really need to accept and acknowledge when you want to develop the neighborhood. And I know that money always rules, but it's just important for us that when you say that you want to make sure that there is greenery, or like it's gonna be green out here, what do you actually mean? And then we just really want to show what our versions of that is. And that's
So-
one of the big nice things about being right in a neighborhood that's going to be developing within a few years.
Now, with the first project, you got grants, you had an idea, everything fell into place, and then later you went, oh, let's start a restaurant and whatnot. So what I want to know is what's different about this project? Like, you came into it, with experience, but tell me about the business model for this place. Like, how is it different from the grant-based project that you started?
So here's just much more space. It's gonna be a seasonal place though, because us only having 7 years here, we build everything in structures that can be moved elsewhere if we're not allowed to stay for longer. But that's also structures that cannot really stand there throughout the winter. So it is going to be a seasonal open place. And for now at least, it is definitely also something that is easier to make a business case around, because the winter, no matter how well you do it, you're not going to attract as many people for an urban farm in the winter as in the summertime. So on ØsterGRO, it's really like the summer keeps the winter alive.
Yeah.
And
but tell me, like,
we're not going to do the same here. It's going to be a seasonal place from May to end of October. And what we wanted to do here was then also to try to do all these things that we have not been able to do in ØsterGRO. So because we've always promised all the vegetable on the rooftop farm to members ahead of the season, and only used a bit of things in the kitchen and a bit of tastings when we had school children up. With ØsterGRO, we really, really wanted not to have promised all the vegetables from the field in the beginning of the year. So we really want to see how can we make different events in the field where people can just harvest themselves, come into the field in another way than we have been able to do in ØsterGRO, and actually produce all of the perennial plants. It doesn't make sense to have a rooftop where there's only 35 centimeters of soil. So have all the berry bushes and all of that. Also all of that, but then it becomes more nerdy in terms of all the gardening world of having all our vegetables being mostly annuals and biennial plants, and then compared to the plants that just live year after year and have a really solid root system and doesn't have to be established every year. It's more sustainable with that. So it's been really, really nice to be able to focus finally on perennials as well. But right now we sit in a vegetable field that is very much of 1 year and 2 year old plants, and gonna have a rotation within them. But for us, it was just nice to have a space now where we could also focus on implementing all the plants that are not necessarily edible for us, but have a function in creating an ecosystem with all the birds and insects that it attracts, which should be a part of every garden, every farm. But when you have a limited space to grow on, then it's hard to take out beds that only have the potential of creating an ecosystem. But it is crucial, and you understand first when you have space for it, and then you actually do it, and then you see how it works when you finally create that balance. Because they're not only all the aphids coming, but there are also ladybirds to eat them because some of the flowers attracted them. So it's just a bigger play art as well for us to really, really get to understand these things on a long term as well.
How does this work? How do you, not because it's all about making money, but I mean, how does it, generate income?
On ØsterGRO, it's also our restaurant that is the key income.
Okay, that's
for
where
the project. Yeah. But it's a restaurant in a different way than it is on ØsterGRO. So here you can walk in, you can come, there's a new menu written on the board depending on what's from the field and what's from the farmers that we collaborate with. But it's the restaurant, it's the events that we throw here that is paying for everyone to work here.
But what about all the vegetables? How do they get used?
So they're used in the restaurant. They're also sold to restaurant around us. They're also gonna be like self-pick from people living in the area, but it's not the value of the vegetable when they're harvested that plays a role. It's the story they tell while they grow.
Okay.
So we're still not doing urban farms to live from the produce when it's harvested.
Okay.
We're urban farms that live off the experience that we can like bring people, like include people in when they're growing.
Cool.
So that's a huge difference
Yeah, it
from
is.
a lot of other farms
Yeah.
in urban contexts.
So talking to some of the other people here in Copenhagen, from the city, and all of these cool ideas that the city, allows people to do, whether it's sharing Copenhagen or, grants and whatnot. I mean, what I find super interesting is it's not just the vision and the cool ideas, but there's also job creation. I mean, you have a restaurant. You got people working here. They got people in the kitchen cooking. Tell me about that. Tell me about how many jobs have you created? You don't have to give me a specific number, but I mean, there's also that aspect, which is good generally for the economy.
I mean, definitely, and that's what we really wanted to do back then already with ØsterGRO, was to make sure that we could make a place where we could create a green job, we called it back then. But it is what it is, like a meaningful job that's fair, fairly paid, with people that is just passionate about what they do and not dying in a job to make it a living.
Yeah.
And that job we have created for 45 people now. Of course, not full-time, all of them, but also people studying that have a study job in either of our projects. But it was very important for us to make it sufficient and run around in that way. So we were able to live from it ourselves, of course, but also like create a nice working environment and meaningful jobs for people that wanted to get engaged. And there are a lot of people that wants to get engaged in an edible city landscape like this. So there's definitely potential for more. The only thing that is hard right now is that there are no chefs left in Copenhagen. It's crazy.
Too many restaurants?
Everybody is looking for chefs too, just too little chef.
Yeah.
Because it's a crazy industry. People have just left the industry under Corona.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the chefs that usually live in Copenhagen, they moved back. So a lot of foreigners usually work as chefs as well in Copenhagen. But a lot of them has left also after Corona. A lot of them started to study. Because in the end, there really needs to be a revolution within the whole restaurant business. People work way too many hours for a bad salary and bad working conditions in general. So it's hard now to find chefs, even though you want to make a restaurant where you actually make a really good job for chefs. Then it's a very, very poor market right now.
Okay, what advice can you give somebody somewhere else in the world, maybe even us here in Copenhagen? I mean, who have a similar vision and want to get started. I mean, what's your main, passionate piece of advice?
So my main advice would be to share your idea and not be so hiding your idea
my idea.
Exactly, because that was the only reason why we got the opportunity to start. Had we not spoken up with people about the fact that we were looking for a roof because we wanted to create this and this and this, had we been afraid that somebody else would have done it before us or whatever. So that's one advice. Another advice is competition in general. I'm not familiar with the word at all. No, but it's just when you're actually passionate about something and you want to create more of that in the world, people that do the same, you should never see them as competition, but always just as people that you work side by side with in order to reach a common goal. So, and that I think is very, very much the the essence of working within organic produce as small-scale farmers, whether it's being in the city or in the countryside in Denmark, which I freaking love. That people are just so collaborative, they're really sharing knowledge. And that would be the third advice. That would be to be, it's very linked to the others, but just really make sure to bring in the knowledge needed, because you're making something that you know that a lot of people will benefit from. So if it's already, when you just say it aloud, you can feel that it's only in your own interest and it's an ego project, leave it behind.
Share it.
And then find out where you can make something that means a lot to a lot of people, and get people hooked that has all the knowledge and that also want to learn from you. And that is something that really creates then another level of knowledge, but also places.
Right. So I have a colleague, Carolyn Steele. She's written a lot of books.
I love her.
Oh, she's great. But she talks a lot about food security. And I remember one of the things she told me was about, if Copenhagen or any really big city in the world was all of a sudden shut down, nobody in or out, we would all run out of food within 2 weeks because it comes from faraway places and all that. So, I mean, how does this play into the all-important, aspect of food security in our cities and urban agriculture also as a solution for feeding our own people? Do you ever think about it?
I mean, for me, it's always been about open people's eyes to the fact that we have really, really good producers all around the city as well. For me, it's never been a goal of seeing the city as an isolated thing, but definitely seeing the problem that you're also mentioning, it is a huge distribution and whatever problem to feed a city. And back in the days, we used to do it with peri-urban farms, and that should be on what we are gonna start doing again. But for me, it's really, really linking the city up with direct sale from small-scale farmers, as well as to do it ourselves in the city. But our vision has never been to be stating that the cities can be self-sufficient. It's just been to show a piece of the magic that's done in the countryside, and to really let us understand that we depend on each other. It's definitely amazing as well to inspire people to produce their own food.
Yeah.
The ones that are having a garden, having a balcony and whatever. But it's not about self-sufficiency. It's about being in contact with something that resembles nature.
But sure, but it plays a role though, right? I mean, it's a part of the big picture of food security and whatnot. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
You're not Caroline Steele, but I mean, it's still.
But I don't think that we should be self-sufficient by using all our facades and roofs and so on.
Okay.
I don't think it's not the primary goal for urban farms in Copenhagen, at least. Elsewhere in the world, where we have a complete different food scene, it plays very much more a role of being self-sufficient. But it's just not the goal here, because we are very well linked. We just need to be better linked and understand that there's a season and there's local produce, and we don't need to bring it in from elsewhere, but it's going to be in our countryside that the majority of the food is going to be produced. And right now we just produce mostly fodder for animals. That could be food for people if we limited the amounts of animals that we are going to eat and actually let them play their role in the ecosystem, which is being grazers or living in a forest or whatever. But our problem is that our farmland is not used to farm food for us. It's used to farm food for animals. And then we import a lot of feed for animals as well. So that is these stories that are important for us to make something that's mainstream for people, mainstream knowledge, in order for us to take really good decisions when we go out and use our money.
Cool. Livia?
Yes.
Thank you so much for.
It was so great to meet you,
amazing
Michael.
to hear the whole story from you yourself. So pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.